percent of consumers want to have a positive impact on the environment. However, only 20.
Hi, welcome to today's session with Euromonitor International. Our Head of Travel Research, Caroline Bremner, will be sharing her insights on innovation strategies for a sustainable recovery. So without further ado, let's welcome Caroline.
Hi. Thank you very much, Carol, for introducing me. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you at WTM today. So I'm Caroline, I'm Head of Travel Research at Euromonitor International, and we have just published today a new report called Travel Rewired, Innovation Strategies for a Resilient Recovery. And so for today's session, what we'll do is have a look at the global outlook for travel and tourism, and then we'll run through 4 different regions, so Europe, the Americas, Asia Pacific, and the Middle East and Africa. And just taking a look at each region to see what the state of recovery looks like, and also what's happening in terms of consumers and businesses, and using innovation as a way to innovate out of the crisis. So for those of you who aren't familiar yet with Euromonitor International, we are a global market research company. We are headquartered in London, and we also have around the world 15 offices. So that has been truly very helpful, particularly during the pandemic, to get a real sense of what's happening in over the 100 countries that we research around the world. And I'm delighted that our research teams have compiled all the case studies that I'm going to share with you today. So there's a really interesting batch of travel brands and travel businesses that we're going to share with you today. So let's turn and first of all look at the global tourism outlook. Here, this is where we have a travel forecast model. So we have created this model with our analytics team. And obviously we update as and when there's new information coming through. And we also update on a quarterly basis. And this helps us get a sense of where we're at in the recovery. We all know that 2020 was a catastrophic year for essentially the whole world, but in particular travel and tourism. We were the first industry to close, and then we were the last industry to reopen. And we're still seeing very much the majority of the world with travel bans, restrictions, new complicated protocols and quarantines, all sort of a mishmash of protocols in place. So what we have is essentially last year, travel and tourism spending globally fell off a cliff. It dropped by 75%. But I think we need to park that and look at what is happening now and those projections for the future. So our baseline expectation is that recovery will really begin to take hold and that we will return to those pre-crisis levels by 2024. So we're really looking at a long, hard recovery. And of course, we're already seeing accelerated growth in certain regions around the world, and more on that later. But in the worst case, we could be looking at a delay of even to 2026 in terms of returning to those pre-crisis spending levels. And it all depends on what happens with the virus. So if there are new variants, already we've had Delta, some of Delta, but if we have new variants that are more resistant to the extraordinary vaccination program that's been rolled out, then that is going to be a challenge, and that will further delay the situation. When it comes to overall travel product sales, of course, there was that big sharp drop in demand and spending as the travel bans and restrictions very much stifled any form of travel at certain points last year. But there were some areas that we actually saw accelerating. For example, online travel jumped forward by 5% in a single year last year. So we now see that online travel sales account for 54% of total travel product sales in, globally around the world. And what we're also seeing is that travel businesses are doubling down on their investments in technology. And so 39% of industry that we spoke to said that they were investing and implementing new technology as a means to future-proof their business. So those are very, quite impressive numbers. When we look at the different priorities across the four regions that we're looking at today, the sort of number one priority is, yes, introducing new technologies, but equally there is a very strong focus on making sure that the customer journey is as seamless and safe as possible. And equally, we can see that personalization, so that's helped by artificial intelligence, big data, and analytics, to really deliver truly personalized and curated offers and services and experiences to consumers. Again, that's a very important area that we've seen ramp up in the past year. Now, of course, we can't talk about recovery without talking about sustainability, very much at the heart of the rebuild and the building back effort. And we can see that, again, there was an improvement in the number of travel businesses engaging with the Sustainable Development Goals over last year to this year. So now 53% of travel businesses that we spoke to in our industry survey said that they use the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, to guide their initiatives in terms of sustainability, whether that's environmental, social, or cultural. And the other thing is we also can see how many travel businesses are engaging with the different Sustainable Development Goals. We know there are 17 of them. And so for some areas, there were some really strong increases, for example, in terms of responsible consumption, in terms of, decent work and economic growth. Some areas have been rolled back, sadly, in terms of, when we look at innovation, that's an area that suffered, but that's because innovation requires a lot of investment and funding. And of course, revenue has been very much constrained and very much impacted negatively by the pandemic. So we're hopeful that innovation investment will pick up in the years to come. So let's now turn and look at our first region of today, which is Europe, which is resetting for recovery. So when we look at Europe, it's actually quite interesting because, we have the fact that the impact of the pandemic was sharp. So growth fell by 70%, slightly less than the global average. And what's happening is that this region is one of the first to recover from the pandemic. And this is very much helped by the vaccination rollout, which has really picked up in the last couple of quarters. But also in terms of travel and tourism, it comes down to the digital COVID certificate. So this was launched in July of this year and enables, freedom of movement for those people that have proof of vaccination or, the negative test and, all the requirements that are needed to, cross borders. We also saw that domestic tourism was a kind of substitute and a stand-in for international tourism spending in the short to mid-term. And that's also helped, players that are in lodging or short-term rentals and experiences. But we do see that some sectors are going to trail the recovery, especially airlines. And that's quite a complex challenge because we have the EU Green Deal, we have the need for reaching net zero by 2050. And so already countries, it's not just the pandemic and the bans and restrictions that are curtailing growth in airlines, it's also the green agenda and the fact that countries like France and Germany have banned short-haul flights of 3 hours. So, airlines, it's looking like a very long haul for recovery. Now let's have a look at some of those innovation case studies. The first one that is really interesting is innovation for transformation. We know with COP26 happening on our doorsteps at the moment in the UK and Glasgow, that there is such a drive now, a real sort of impetus to make positive change and to go beyond the rhetoric and words to action. And so in terms of aviation itself, we're seeing this shift towards clean energy. Already in Scotland, we've seen the sort of first hybrid electric flight in Orkney. We can see that, for example, in Paris, they have a very ambitious urban mobility scheme and program that they're going to be rolling out over the next few years as they gear up for the Paris Olympics. And here we have the volocopter in the image here flying over the Eiffel Tower. Now, this is one of the first electric aircraft to be approved by the European Safety Agency. So again, there's some interesting developments, and that's alongside players like EasyJet investing in sort of hydrogen and hybrid electric aircraft along with Airbus. And then you've also got Lufthansa with its very positive steps that it's taking with sustainable aviation fuel. So there's a lot of work being done to really drive down emissions in the aviation sector. Another interesting example that we have is innovating for creativity. Tomorrow's Air is a very interesting platform that was co-founded by Christina Beckman of the Adventure Travel Trade Association after an eye-opening trip to the Antarctic. And she saw firsthand the negative impacts of climate change on biodiversity and the environment. So Christina and her co-founder created a platform called Tomorrow's Air that brings together travel businesses, consumers, along with artists. And it's all about investing and helping push forward direct carbon capture from the air. And Christina and the team have been working with Climeworks. Now, they are a very interesting Swiss company and have recently opened a new direct air capture site in Iceland called Orca, which I would encourage everybody to take a look at. I can't wait to go and visit. It's very close to the Blue Lagoon. It's very close to also the Geothermal Museum. So you can see that travel and tourism is interwoven with energy, and it's also about encouraging travelers to be more conscious about their energy use. And this is a great platform to do that. Now let's turn to the Americas that are rewiring for travel to be much more sustainable and also much more consumer-centric. And what we're seeing in the Americas is a very strong ramping up of the sort of SDG agenda in terms of gender equality and inclusion and diversity. And so the backdrop of the Me Too movement, the Black Lives Matter movement. And so there's a very strong push. We saw some really interesting data from our industry survey saying that 70% of companies in the Americas are engaging with gender equality. That is really very high. And you can see that coming through in terms of the business priorities. So yes, we see a push towards much greater personalization. You can't be truly personalized unless you are embracing diversity and inclusion. So when it comes to innovation in the Americas, this example of Wheel the World was very interesting because it's tailoring to the accessible tourism market. And I just loved this picture of the lady in the wheelchair at Machu Picchu. And so dreams really can be made reality. And, it's really empowering to see companies that are truly offering curated and personalized services to meet the needs of their consumers. So walking the walk when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And they also use the power of the crowd. So, everybody, they've got sort of using their app to collect at least 200 metrics on accessibility for each site that the travelers can go to and report back. And it's that power of people to create a much more inclusive environment for travelers. Also in the Americas, in terms of gender equality and driving that forward, we have Sister Wave that is based in Sao Paulo in Brazil. They've created a platform that is for women, for transgender and cis people who can come together and be, feel safe. There's a network of at least, 20,000 sisters that are on the site. They have over 5,000 hosts and are covering almost 2,000 cities. So they've also got their site set on Europe. So it's great to see this case study, this startup that has already been awarded by the UN for its innovation. And it's great to see this also being rolled out, hopefully globally across the world. So let's now turn to Asia Pacific. So it's quite surprising when you look at Asia, because this region, as we know, has the greatest potential for growth, driven by the rise in middle-class households. And, this is where the majority of the growth is going to come from in travel and tourism when we look over the long term, 2030 and beyond. But in terms of the short term, this region is really struggling to reopen. And it's kind of, there are many different factors for that. Obviously, there's a lack of global standards in reopening. We can see that the EU has moved forward with its digital COVID certificate, and that aligns with the IATA travel pass. But there's no global standard as yet. And that's really hampering progress in the emerging regions such as Asia Pacific. And then also we have the issue of vaccine equity. We know that over up to 50% of the world has been vaccinated. But in emerging and low income regions, the number is less than 4%. So it's very unequal. And that again is, stopping progress in terms of, Asia being able to get back to those pre-crisis levels. But ultimately, once we have a greater flow of vaccines around the world, then we will see, the situation improve. And also once we have a global standard for a vaccine passport, etc. So by 2024, we expect Asia Pacific to be back on track and to have regained those losses that it's seen over the past few years because of the pandemic. When it comes to innovation, Asia Pacific always sort of kicks it out of the park in terms of digital transformation. In Japan, for example, we have the Print Smart Inn, and they have innovated using contactless. Deploying robots, using artificial intelligence, the power of mobile technology. And what they've done is just make the whole user experience very seamless, so that, even before when you're booking, all the way through to when you arrive at the hotel, everything is self-service and automated. And it sort of makes it much more fluid for the guest, but equally it's much safer in terms of reduced contact during those pandemic years. And of course, robots, yes, they're quite quirky, but equally they're helping with hygiene and security. And we see that there is a massive push in Asia Pacific, very much ahead of the curve when it comes to doubling down on digital transformation. Equally, we have the importance of innovating for renewal and well-being. And this is a really interesting example from Thailand, where we see the Raksa Wellness and Medical Retreat, where they've brought together sort of traditional holistic medicine with, the very latest medical science. And so, this very truly holistic approach to, providing the guests with personalized dietary and training programs that are really tailored to them. And of course, it's based on a collaboration between the minor hotels, then a clinic plus a hospital. So again, using the power of the different skill sets, so whether it's medics or physiotherapists or dietitians, all combined together and pulling together to provide a really holistic and very sort of energizing experience, I would imagine. So our last region is the Middle East and Africa, and last but not least, slightly slower to recover than some of the other regions, like we saw with the Americas or Europe. And there's some, again, different factors. We have, new variants. We had also the fact that the region is still struggling from war and, and conflict. But we do see, in terms of travel and tourism, a very much sort of ramping up of online travel sales and activities. So it's jumping from 30% to over 50% of travel sales being booked online, and over a quarter being booked via mobile phone direct. And then, of course, we have 37% of travel businesses saying that they're going to be investing in the very latest technology. So whether that's, 5G, artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, robotics. So again, strong signs that, everything is transforming digitally to help future-proof businesses, not just for the next pandemic, but, for the foreseeable future. And of course, we always have Dubai to show us what the latest trends are. And what we have in Dubai is that they have an autonomous transport strategy. So they are aiming for 25% of all trips that are being taken in the Emirate to be autonomous by 2030. So that's really quite impressive. It ranks very high already in the autonomous index by KPMG. And equally, we can see that, they're testing and trialing autonomous vehicles in Sharjah, Abu Dhabi, as well as Dubai. And of course, moving to sort of a more integrated urban mobility system has many, many benefits. So one, you reduce the number of accidents, and most importantly, is you improve the quality of life of your residents. So it's going to remove like almost 400 million hours spent in congestion and traffic. So that's a major boost to happiness, not just for residents, but also for visitors. And we can see that this sort of fleet of autonomous vehicles is going to be rolled out by General Motors and Dubai in the next couple of years, which is very exciting. So here we are with our last innovation case study. And this is where we're in Gabon, which is being paid to look after its forest and its biodiversity. And of course, with COP26, we had the announcement yesterday that there's going to be a ban on any sort of cutting down of trees from 2030. Well, already action is being taken now. So Gabon being paid and bankrolled by the likes of Norway and the sort of the African, Sub-Saharan African Rainforest Fund to preserve its carbon sink in terms of not, doing any deforestation and protecting, as I say, its forests, its wildlife. And of course, that's fantastic for the elephants that are, that are in the jungles and the rainforests. And of course, where there's a protection of biodiversity, there's huge opportunity for sustainable tourism. They go hand in hand. So it's great to see that there's going to be a new network of safari lodges, and we can just wish them the best for this new initiative. So just to summarize today, yes, it's going to be a very hard slog for recovery in travel and tourism. As I said, the best case is it's going to take 5 years. It could take several years. It really depends on what happens with COVID and the speed of vaccinations. But we have identified these 4 key pillars of innovation. And it's great to see that travel businesses are, being very active in terms of digital transformation. Sustainability is, locked into so much great work that's being done in the industry to rebuild. We have the fantastic announcement tomorrow about the Glasgow Declaration, which is a collaboration between the Travel Foundation, Tourism Declares, and the UN WTO One Planet Network. So already travel and tourism is at the forefront of so many great initiatives, and what we need is that sort of moving from words to action. I think we're all very keen for that to happen. Of course, the whole of the customer journey needs to be COVID proofed, and that's a given. We've lived with risk in the travel industry for years. This is nothing new for us. But what is very interesting is this new focus on people and the importance of being truly inclusive and truly diverse in how we engage, and creating very, very authentic and true emotional connections with the traveller, so that they do feel that they are being listened to and being looked after. So just like to wish everybody, continued success with the recovery. And of course, if anybody would like to download the report, they can go to the Euromonitor blog and download the report from now. And of course, we're always happy to hear from you if you have any questions about the research or anything that's been contained in this presentation today. So I'd just like to say thank you for joining us, whether you're in London or joining virtually from wherever you are in the world, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.